Hey there, everybody. I believe we are live. Ooh, we got some folks from Germany. Got Cooper from Los Angeles. We got Egypt. Wow. A couple folks from Egypt. Thanks for joining us. Gonna let a few minutes go to allow some folks to roll in. We got about 19 folks in the chat right now. All right, we got London joining us. All right, we got some more people rolling in, so I'm going to give it just another minute as those folks join the chat. As we're waiting, let's start the Q&A. That's what we're all here for. We're here to learn, we're here to ask questions, and we're here to get into some back and forth discussions about what's on your mind when it comes to the job search. Today's post that went up, our Udacity career tip of the day, was about networking and using meetup.com in order to build your network. So that's the topic we'll toss out there as a suggestion if folks have questions around networking. But this is also an open forum, so please feel free to ask any questions about any aspect of the job search that's on your mind. Ooh, Nigeria, New York, India, welcome everyone. Ooh, we got someone who has 2 interviews coming up next week with separate employers. Bravo! Big round of applause. 2 upcoming interviews. One is a first interview and another is a second, making it to round 2. Love it. Any questions around the interview that are on your mind? There is also a little bit of a delay between me talking and the chat, so if you're seeing some pauses, I'm just making sure I get all of your comments in before I start barreling forward. All right, we've got one comment here, question, our first question. Started sending out applications last week and are currently struggling with crafting the cover letters. All right. Well, so this question about the cover letter. The cover letter is a very interesting document because it's changed quite a bit over the years. And I'm going to give you a perspective for the US, but of course this may vary country to country and culture to culture, and possibly even city to city or company to company, depending on who you're talking to. Some companies are very old school, some are very new school, you know, the smaller startups. So everyone has a bit of a different flavor. But the way that you want to think about your cover letter as you're crafting them, chances are if you're struggling this much with your cover letter, it's because you're looking at templates that are most likely older. Probably full page templates. Correct me in the comments if that's not the case. But the old way of writing a cover letter was actually writing a letter. You have your, back how I learned it in college, you would put your address, you would put your phone number, you would say, "Dear hiring manager," or whoever's name you had. You'd write paragraphs and paragraphs, and then you would sign it at the bottom. It was very old school because that's people actually wrote letters back in the day and would mail them in with their resume. And it was the whole package. There was no personal websites, LinkedIn profiles, GitHubs, and all that kind of stuff. So what ended up happening with these cover letters is as the times change and as our communication styles have changed, the cover letters have also changed. Or at least the way that we should be thinking about them have also changed. instead of writing these long form formal letters, you have to start thinking about the person who's receiving your cover letter. Recruiters typically spend, I think, 6 to 10 seconds per resume, which means that the chances of them actually reading through everything in a 5-paragraph cover letter are very small. So we have to think about the attention span and consider the time of the person who's reading the cover letter that we're sending in. So the way that I like to think about cover letters these days is, a very general rule of thumb: write it as though you're writing an email. Emails are typically short. If someone sends you a 10-paragraph email, you are not probably going to read it today. You're probably going to mark it as unread or archive it and move on to the next thing. So if you're going to send a good email is very clear as to what you're trying to communicate. It's able to do it in 1 to 3 short paragraphs, and it's written in a bit more colloquial speak or a bit more human speak than old school cover letters. So if you're really struggling with getting your cover letters together because of just the amount of commitment, try and get a form cover letter that is fairly specific to the type of job title and company you're applying to, and then tweak the opening and the closing and some certain points in between. Have a couple of variable sections that you can tailor to each job so that it is both easy to put together for each job. You're not starting from scratch every time, but also slightly tailored. I hope that helps give a little bit more context on how to think about the cover letter. And I'll jump back into some of the comments here and see if you wrote anything else or if there's any other comments around that. All right. All right, I got real excited and I jumped right into the Q&A here, but I guess I really should introduce myself. My name is Martin, and I am a career advisor at Udacity. I'm also a content creator, and my background is in both marketing, career development, and content creation. So I think a lot about how not only your skills will help you improve in your career, but also the mentality you need and the promotions that you need in order to face all the rejection and anxiety that comes with the job search, and also continuing to put yourself out there and go to events and post updates on social media accounts and different things like that. It's navigating the career terrain is pretty difficult, and I try to look at it from both a promotional and a bit more psychological side. And so that's kind of the stuff that we talk about in these Q&As and in these videos that we're putting together for you. We have a question about the technical interview. And full disclosure, I'm not a developer, so I've never been on a technical interview. But through all the conversations that I've had over the years, my understanding of the technical interview is that a lot of folks are really scared about going in and messing it up, right? You have all this pressure to get it right on the board. You're doing it in a way that's not the normal way you do it. Normally you're at a computer with Google by your side. But when you go into a technical interview, some of the things to keep in mind is that this isn't necessarily the end-all be-all. I've heard stories of folks who went in, messed up during the technical interview, went home, took that same question, and tried it again at home, got the right solution, and then sent it in saying, hey, I appreciate you showing me this, or I appreciate this conversation today. I wanted to continue exploring this and really make sure I nailed it when I got home. And here are my results, and they've gotten positive feedback from that. And so there are additional opportunities to keep that conversation going, even if there is some sort of like mental block or thing that you have during a technical interview. Another thing that's really good to think about when it comes to the technical interview is a lot more about how you communicate what you're doing than just getting the right answer. If you're dead silent the whole time, just writing on the board and say, there's my solution, and you don't explain the problem that you saw, the solution you attempted, the problems you encountered along the way, the different changes that you made as you were proceeding through the interview, you're going to actually miss out on this big piece of what they're analyzing, which is how do you communicate and how do you think through a problem in a team environment. So try and keep that in mind during the technical interview as well. If you have the chance, do practice stuff at home and try to explain your code to someone who's not a developer. That way you can actually get more comfortable talking about things in a more like, I don't know, maybe dumbed down way, a way that I would be able to understand what it is that you're doing and creating. It's very helpful to just simplify things for folks because not everyone you talk to is going to be highly technical. All right, our next question in the list here today is around the phone interview. It says, how should I approach the phone interview? It's a very, very general question. If you have any more specific questions around that, I'd love to dig in deeper, but I'll kind of give a broad overview of thoughts around phone interviews. So a phone interview is very much a get to know you kind of a conversation. It's going to be primarily behavioral questions, background, just getting the basics down to see if you're someone who meets the qualifications and has enough conversational style to get to the next interview. And so as you're practicing for this, you want to have a few really key talking points ready to go. And what I mean by that is you don't need a new, let's say, answer or story for every single potential question that could be asked. All you need are a couple of stories, maybe 2 or 3 good stories of a time that you worked on a project, or a time that you struggled with a coworker, or a time that you were part of a big launch, or something along those lines. Maybe something you learned and built on your own. And every single story has struggles, has wins, has a story arc of like, here was the problem, here was the proposed solution, here's how we solved it in the end. And what you can do with that is you can actually use those 3 stories to answer a wide variety of questions. So if you go to a website like the Muse or something, you download the top 30 questions, the most common interview questions that are out there, what you can do is go through that list and see how many you can answer with the same story. So let's say it's, what's a time you struggled with a coworker? You could say, well, I was working on this big project. It was a huge initiative to launch a new credit card. This is something that I did back at Discover Card back in the day. We had this big project launching a new credit card. And one of the teams that I was working with was a mobile team. And that was a new team with a lot of fresh thinking and fresh ideas. And I was kind of the middle person between the old school e-business team and the new school mobile team. And the struggle that I found in that position was trying to like be the communicator, the barterer between those 2 teams. So that's one way to talk about a struggle. But then you could also flip that and say, what's a time you worked on a technology that you were really excited about? Well, I got to collaborate with the mobile team on this really great new technology as we were launching this brand new card, right? So it's the same story, different perspectives, and you just kind of veer off in the way that you want to talk about it. So if you have your stories down and then also have the questions that you want to ask, the phone interview is going to be much, much easier because all the pressure is going to be taken off because you don't have to worry about every single question they ask you. You have the stories already in your back pocket ready to go. All right. We have a question about whether or not you should hide your history. I'll read it out. I want to change careers and become a data scientist. I've been playing poker online for the last 10 years. Should I avoid telling that on my resume? Also advise on how to switch industries at 29 years of age, 5 years of experience from mobile telecom. I'm not sure if these are separate questions or the same one, but hiding your history. It's a really big question because a lot of folks have gaps in their history or medical histories or all sorts of different things that come up during their work life that create these sort of awkward moments. And it's not a clear-cut answer what you should be doing, but a couple of things that you can sort of keep in mind as you think about, how do I own what I'm good at, what my career history is, and build upon it in a positive way. Because the worst thing you could do is someone says, well, what have you been doing the past 10 years? And you say, oh, nothing really. Like that, in my mind, is worse than saying that you've been a professional poker player. Because it's going to just leave them to sort of fill it in with their own imagination, and they'll fill it in with something much worse. Whatever it is that they dislike the most is probably what they'll fill it in with. And so I tend to think that honesty is the best policy. Now, you don't have to go overboard with your honesty, but honesty is typically the best policy when it comes to anything related to the job search, so that you don't end up tying your brain up in knots and shooting yourself in the foot. So when it comes to having a background in something like poker, the fear, I would assume, is like, oh, it's gambling. It's, people might look down on it. But poker is a huge industry, and it's also a very big pastime for lots and lots of people. So the thing that I would start thinking about is, how do I capitalize on my background with poker? How do I create maybe like a for fun, maybe not for money, but for fun poker group where people get together who work in the tech field, get together, play fun games of poker, and chat about new technologies, maybe new technologies in the poker arena or in the games industry, let's say. Poker also is something that's really interesting if you're really good at that and reading people's bluffs and all that kind of stuff. There's an entire cell phone game industry that's kind of based on poker games. Maybe not poker games, but gambling games in casinos. And so they might be great places to look where they don't have any sort of negative outlook on that background. And so I would spend less time trying to hide what you've done in the past and the way, the career path that's gotten you here, and spend more time trying to think how you can overlap your new skills with your old interests, and then find other people that think the same way. For instance, I knew someone who was really into sports and really into programming, but there were no sports tech meetups near them. So they started their own. And what ended up happening was they ended up becoming the go-to person in their small town for sports technology. And they were able to reach out to all the local companies and bring in speakers. And one of the CEOs was like, hey, you seem like a really interesting person who's doing interesting things. Would you be open, and are you looking for a role right now? And they started talking about internships and things like that. So you can find ways to leverage it. And especially in this world of, anyone can create a blog or a YouTube channel or anything like that. You could apply the psychology of poker to, the tech world and just kind of see where you take things from there. So I wouldn't hide it necessarily, but I would try and channel it in a very positive way. I'm looking through some of the questions here. So it looks like we have a variety of questions where folks are worried about their age and their experience. Having just 3 months of a Nanodegree, or, being in your upper 40s, things like that. Who would hire you? So this is actually, it's a pretty big question that's happening in the tech world right now. I've seen a lot of articles around ageism come out recently, and it is a discussion that's being had about age and the struggles that come along with people at different levels in their career. But at the end of the day, no matter where you are in your career, there's only two ways to look at it. One, I'm going to find the opportunity that will let me get to work, or I'm going to let all these other factors get in my way. So if you believe that you can't get a job because of your experience or because of your age, then that is going to become the truth. And what we need to do is take a step back and say, all right, here are all the factors that are working for me and against me. The things that work for me is that I probably have a great background, a great history. and things that I've worked on in the past. And so how can I leverage that knowledge in this job search? Now, the other thing that you can do is take a look at your online presence. I would actually say your online presence is more important than your age. If you are worried about the age side of things, but you have no online brand, then that might be what you want to focus on and develop, because that's one way that you can start, doing a, left hook to that worry and start overcoming it by saying, age isn't a factor here. Look at all the things that I've done. And maybe you have a GitHub that's really strong, but is that something that people who aren't technical would be able to access and see and be able to really easily interact with? Maybe you need to layer on additional skills. And this is something that I think is really fascinating, which is the idea of skill layering. You could be a great speaker, but you could also be a great speaker who also has a background in programming. So not only are you a great speaker, but you're the best speaker in your group of programmers. So now you've got a double skill. And then you could also be the best speaker who's good at programming, who is also great at creating videos or something like that. Now you've got 3 skills that layer on top of each other, and that just makes you more and more and more capable in building your brand, putting yourself out there, getting your face in front of more people, because that's really what the game is at the end of the day. During the job search, you're in almost a sales mode. And if you're not visible, if you're not coming up in people's search results, if you're not coming up in the social media feeds of people's profiles, if you are invisible, then it's going to be very hard to go from 0 to a job and start a whole relationship. Now, some people might do that very publicly with a blog or a video or something. You could also do it quietly in the background by having one-on-one coffees with people. Maybe reach out to everyone who's in your LinkedIn network, who's of a certain age, and ask them if there's any jobs in their company for folks that are similar to the two of you. And so those are the types of things that we want to start thinking about rather than getting caught up in the barriers. We want to think, yes, there are barriers. There are things that are going to be in the way. For instance, early on in my career, I was an introvert. So I had to take a lot of time and struggle through that and build a skill set. It doesn't mean I'm not still introverted. It just means that I've found ways to do it in a comfortable way for me. So if you're worried about any of these sort of barriers, try not to think of them as limiting factors. Try to think of them as another thing that you should create a secondary solution to. I hope that made sense. And we'll dig back into some of the questions here. Ooh, I like this one from Cooper. I would like tips for being succinct in interviews. I struggle with getting from point A to point B without being overly talkative. This is actually a video we're going to be creating soon. It's actually one of 2 videos around the topic of telling stories in the interview. A few things that you can do in order to improve your in order to shorten the length of your stories. One of my favorite quotes is, I would have written a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time. And so it really is tough to be succinct, as we can see on this call, where I'm just talking into the computer and clearly rambling here and there. One of the things that's going to be extremely helpful for you is to write down the things that you have said in past interviews or want to say in future interviews, and look at it on paper. Once you've done that, try and put the paper to the side and recite what you wrote down from memory while recording yourself. Then listen back to that recording and hear all the tangents you went on and all the ums and likes and things like that. Listening back to yourself is one of the fastest ways to improve your speaking ability. And so you've got the written piece, you've got the vocal piece, you can go back and listen to it, you can make more recordings and go back and listen to it. Then you want to go practice. You want to practice your kind of over talking with people that don't matter so much. You don't want your first conversation to be that dream job interview. So you want to set up coffees with people who have the job that you wish you had, and then ask them questions and have them ask you questions, and allow yourself to sort of practice telling these shorter form stories, answering and telling these stories, answering these types of questions in a short form way. If you do 5 to 10 coffees, you should get pretty good at this skill, so that the first interview you go on, you've got it down. You know the things that you like to talk about, you know the things that people like to hear, and you are in a really good spot moving forward. So I hope that helps you with that piece of the job search. What do I do about professional references when my current employer, where I have the largest bulk of my experience, does not know I'm planning to leave? This is a really good question. I actually haven't encountered this one before. So I'm gonna sort of brainstorm out loud, and I'd love for you all to sort of join in the comments with your thoughts on this as well. A couple things that come to mind are, who else in your life could you reach out to aside from your let's say manager or primary employer? Secondly, are there any coworkers that you might be able to have that confidential conversation with who could also vouch for your work ethic? Has anyone ever left you a recommendation on LinkedIn? Could you reach back out to them? And we sort of go down the list there of who are the people in your life that you could trust that aren't that one manager. Maybe you've had past managers in the same job. Would any of them be able to be your reference? References are a very interesting thing. A lot of companies do rely heavily on them, and a lot of companies, I'm not 100% sure, but I've heard contradictory stories of whether or not people actually get called or not. I think you want to find someone who, I guess the key thing that you want to remember when it comes to a reference, and this is an article I was reading recently, where they were saying you don't want your reference to be so, you want your reference, or whoever you ask to be your reference, to give a fair judge of your work. So if it's so over the top positive, then the company will be like, yeah, this person's just giving me a story. And you also don't want to get someone who's going to be super negative about you. You want someone who's going to be like, here were the things that I saw them struggle with, and here's how they overcame those struggles and why they're such a great employee. So that's just one thought to keep in mind as you are looking for people to represent you in the references. But again, this isn't something I'm as strong in knowledge with, so please share your thoughts in the chat and see if we can help each other with this question. Ooh, here's a good one. Time management. What is the best way to handle your current career, your day job, and your side project, or a product you are building? This is a big one. I've always been someone who's been sort of a side project person. I started a small little business on the side of, when I was working in advertising, I had a small little meetup group that continued to grow and grow and grow until I was teaching courses and a bunch of other things, which kind of led to this job, actually. There's a number of different things that you have to consider when asking this question. The first one is, how comfortable is your company with the fact that you have a side project? Are they open-minded about it? Do they actually see that how it brings value back into your day-to-day job? Or do they see it as something that detracts from your job and a distraction? Maybe you're not performing as well as work. If you're not performing well, having a public side project is going to be a tough thing, because then that's going to come up in your performance reviews. But if you're doing your job well, that's the first thing you have to do. You have to do your job well before you have a very public side project. Otherwise, managers and other coworkers could get resentful. Then if you're doing your job well and you have good rapport with your boss, one of the things that I saw become very helpful when I was working in advertising was I let my boss know about the side project. And what the side project was just a meetup series that was in collaboration with the American Marketing Association. And what ended up happening was they actually let us use the office space for our meetups on the nights and the weekends. So that was one of those situations where, again, honesty is a great thing when you're trying to build your career. It helps you build trust with people that you work with. So if you're hiding it and you're really trying to sneak around or work during the day or something like that, it's going to create some weird issues. But if you are open about it, and again, be very careful about how open you are depending on your day-to-day work performance. I would highly recommend, if you are doing well at your job and you've got a small little project that doesn't interfere with your job going on the side, try and figure out if you can leverage one or the two to help each other, kind of like what I did to use the space. Or if it's not a meetup event or anything along those lines, that's what weekends are for. That's why we have Saturday and Sunday. I remember for many years, I would spend the weekends working on the side project because that was literally the only time. I commuted 4 hours a day. I worked the rest of the time, and then weekends were all that were left. So my buddy and I would get together at Starbucks. We'd work on our project. It extended the timeline of everything that we did out very, very far. But it's not impossible. Granted, everyone has different life situations. This was when I was in my early 20s. If you have family, if you're taking care of, anyone who's sick in your family, all that different stuff, different situations beg for different things. But I guess the question I'd put to you is, how passionate are you about your side project, and what do you want out of it? Do you want it to replace your job someday? Or do you just want it to be a fun thing you do on the side? Or is it something that actually enhances your career and you can move up in the company because of these things that you're doing on the side? Maybe it's Toastmasters or something like that. So that is going to be a tough one. I think when it comes to the time management, a couple ideas come to mind. One, if waking up at the same time every day, which is something I'm not good at, but waking up at the same time every day is a great way to get yourself into a rhythm. And then you can slowly turn the clock back a half hour or 20 minutes, or maybe 10 minutes a day until you get up a few hours earlier. And if you can get just an hour and a half in the morning to just kind of get a few things done with your side project, that's also a way to find a bit more time in the day. And there's a great reward system that you can do to sort of train your brain, is give yourself a nice little reward when you wake up. So back when I was trying to wake up at 5 a.m., I would have cold brew ready immediately. So the first thing I would do after I got out of bed is have a quick sip of cold brew, and got the brain churning immediately. I didn't have to wait 10 minutes, 15 minutes for my coffee to boil. So just a couple of things to think about. Time management is tough though, and everyone's life is a bit different. I would need a little bit more information to get deeper on that one, but I hope that helped. All right, I appreciate your patience as I scroll through some of the questions here. I'm gonna grab us another one. All right, here we go. Considering I am active in my community, should I emphasize my soft skills in an interview, talk about that group I started, or just give priority to my technical skills? This is a big question. And this kind of goes back to the storytelling element. There's a video that's going to be coming out in a couple of weeks where I talk about why storytelling is essential in an interview. And I'll share with you a recent complaint that I got from someone. They looked at me and they said, "Why do I have to tell a BS story? Why can't they just look at my work and let it speak for itself?" Well, the reason that we can't let our work speak for itself is the same reason every company needs to continue to market their products to you. We do not listen. Everyone has a short attention span. And even when people are telling us stuff like this, even this call, you'll only remember small bits of the information. So what needs to happen is that you need to frame up your technical skill set within your more soft skill set. And so it's not just that you can get the job done, it's that you can get the job done while people around you are happy, or at least like content that you're on their team, right? And so these are the types of things that, as you are thinking about that skill that you built, all right, so I have this technical skill and it allows me to do these projects. You also have to think through the entire life cycle of that project. How did it start? How did we decide on the problem? How did we come up with solutions? Those are all interpersonal things. How was the problem brought to me? How did I ask questions back in order to better understand what it is that they were asking me to do? How did I propose new solutions that didn't step on anyone's toes, right? How did I meet deadlines or have to extend deadlines in ways that didn't upset people on the team or cause undue pain to other teams that had their deadlines extended because I didn't meet mine? These are all the things that go into just being a good employee. And so it isn't ever one or the other. It's both together in order to accomplish a goal. And the way you frame it during an interview is, I needed to accomplish this goal. These are the soft skills and these are the hard skills that I used to get there. And here's an example of how I did it. So you want to be specific. You want to incorporate your entire way of working, and then you want to tie it to a result of some sort. So I hope that was a good deep dive into that one, but it's one of those things where you really want to be able to talk about either side interchangeably or together. Here we go. After you have your first interview, is it good to send emails to the hiring manager for the next steps after a week from the first interview? This is a great question. When it comes to the job search, my very general rule of thumb is within 24 hours, after a week, after 2 weeks, after 4 weeks, after 6 weeks, and then stop. So you want to send a thank you note within 24 hours of any meeting you have, whether it's a coffee, an interview, anything. And in that follow-up, you say, I look forward to hearing back from you and continuing the conversation. If there is an opportunity to put in like, hey, I'll check back in next week to see how things are going on your end. Now that's a little deadline that you sort of threw in there that gives them a little bit of like, oh, all right, this person's going to be following up, gives them a little bit of a prime. And then it also gives you a reason to follow up. Now, if you don't put something in there, a little primer of saying, I'm going to follow up in a week, you could always just, within a week, look up some articles related to the conversations you had in the interview or the networking interaction and say, hey, I came across a great article online or a video or an event. I thought you'd be interested. Also, I'd love to know what your timeline is right now for this role. Is there anything else you need from me at this time? So if you haven't heard from them in a week, I do think it's important to follow up. Then if you send that follow up, another week goes by. This is where it starts to get a little gray and a little bit more personal preference, but I would say wait 2 weeks, follow up again, then maybe wait 4 weeks and then follow up again. And if you're not hearing back, eventually, you let them go. But because there's always more fish to go after. But I do think that it's important to follow up. So I would say yes, definitely follow up within a week of the interview, unless they told you a different timeline, in which case respect their timeline. All right, trying to scroll through. So there's a lot of questions coming in. So just trying to catch up. This is our first test, so I'm getting used to reading such a fast scroll. All right, we have a question. It says, I'm new to cybersecurity. I've been in IT for over 15 years and I'm studying for my certification. Should I still apply to entry-level cybersecurity jobs, even if they state 3 years or more experience? This is another one. I mean, honestly, all career questions, because every company is different, every hiring manager is different, and every situation is different. Every job seeker is different. There is no one answer to any of these questions. It's just my opinion, and I think my opinion based on many, many hours and years of conversations with job seekers. But I also think it's something that we should be discussing in the comments here. So if you have other thoughts, please shout them out. But here's my thought on requiring 3 or more years of experience in an entry-level job. When folks are putting together a job description at a company, sometimes they are very on top of it, thinking it through and putting in very crystal clear requirements that are necessary for the job. On the other side of the spectrum, there are folks that just Frankenstein a job description from a bunch of other job descriptions with an assumption of this is what they want or this is the ideal candidate, even if they don't think that they could, catch that person in their net. They put everything that they could possibly want in this role, which scares people off. I recently read an article that said you only actually need 50 to 70% of the things listed in a job description to be in the top qualifiers for that role, which means all the times that we're sitting there and looking at a job and saying, well, I don't have every single thing that's written on this page, and then disqualify ourselves because there was a small line that said you need to know SQL or something like that. Maybe that is 2% of the role, and it's okay that you don't know it. Maybe there's other things that are more important, or maybe that company doesn't even know what they're hiring for, and they're just hoping that this attracts enough people that they'll be able to figure out during the hiring process. So it's tough because the 3+ years of experience turns a lot of people off and makes them not want to apply for the job. The problem with that is if someone went to their manager and said, we're looking for someone with 0 years experience, their manager would say, no, we want someone with at least a few years experience, right? And it's a catch-22. How do you get experience if no one's hiring 0 years of experience? It's tough. And I think that's where you sort of have to use your network and your networking skills and build your networking skills in order to get around those, what I like to call the black hole of the internet websites, the online submission websites, and get around it to actually understand what the reality of the situation is behind that job description. So if you come across these roles that say 3+ years experience, look at the people at the company who have those roles currently. How many people are working there? What are their backgrounds? Do they all have 3 years experience, or a lot of them fairly new and fairly fresh? Reach out to them, get coffee with them, ask them if they needed 3 years experience when they joined, or if that was just a thing that was on the job description that people ignore, but it's there just because. These are the things where there is no one answer, and you need to go out and do your research and talk to people, because the fastest way into a job is through someone who works at the company. So the best thing I could recommend here is find the people that have the job. So look at the job description. I really like this job. Look up all the people that have that job, and then go talk to them to see if, yeah, this is a hard requirement or this is kind of a soft requirement. All right, we got a very big existential question here. Is it a good thing to switch your careers in your mid-30s? this is with everything, it really depends on your situation. Um, my gut response and my gut reaction is it's never too late, or if you're in a really bad situation, a bad idea to switch careers. However, different people have different situations. If you have a lot of debt right now and you are worried that it's going to take 6 months to a year to make a switch, you don't want to lose that security that you might have. If you're taking care of a family, all those other things. But it seems like the question here is more about age. And while my first question is, what is your risk tolerance, and are you ready to make that switch? My next question would be, you're in your mid 30s. Think about how long you're going to be working. Like, you're just at the beginning of your career, really. And if you really think it out, like, chances of retiring at 65 in our day and age are kind of low for most people. So I would highly suspect that you've got a long time, a long career ahead of you in whatever it is that you're going to choose to do. So if you find that you're in a position or going down a path where things aren't looking right, aren't feeling right, you're not doing work that you are engaged with, and I don't like that word passion, but that's what a lot of people throw around. I think you do need to take a step back and say, if I were to make a change, how do I do it in the most responsible way possible so that the next 5 to 10 years, I don't make 3 moves, I just make 1 or 2. You want to make sure that you're putting a lot of thought into this and not just doing it because, it's I got to do it now or I'll never do it. You want to really think through it and, again, do your research. Go out and talk to people who have the job that you wish you were doing or that you think you wish you were doing, and start eliminating options. So I don't think it's too late. I believe that was the question. You have, if we work, you've got 30, 40, 50 years of work ahead of you. That's a long time to make a change. So don't rush it. Think it through and make sure you're making the right decision, but you've got plenty of time on your hands. All right. Hi, how do I start applying for jobs given I feel I can do better prep and create a better resume, and hence have been stalling the process? This actually ties into another question that came through about continuing on with education after the Nanodegree. This is something I like to call productive procrastination. And it's when we say, well, I'm not going to start applying yet because I need to learn a new skill, or I need to work on my resume, or I need to tweak my website. And you just have this long laundry list of things that seem productive, but aren't actually helping move your career forward. They're not helping you meet new people. They're not helping you learn about open jobs. They're not helping you build the interviewing skill. They're just things that are procrastinating what you actually need to be doing. So if you find yourself spending more and more time, taking courses or watching videos or updating your resume is probably good enough. If you're really worried about it, get it reviewed by someone. Your website is probably good enough, and you can always adjust it as you go. Your LinkedIn, same thing. As long as you have one and it's got the basic information, it is good enough. You can always add more as you go. Do not wait for things to be perfect. They never will be, and there will always be something else to learn. So if your end goal is to make a switch and find a job, the faster you get to the real stuff, the networking, the interviewing, all of that good stuff, the better you're going to be. All right, here's another one. How to get a job as someone fresh out of school and compete with those who have more experience. This is one of the most common things in sort of parallel with the, how can I find a job in my late 40s? How can I find a job right out of school? These two things, it's very interesting to be a career coach because you have these back-to-back calls. And on the first call, the person says, I'm never going to be able to find a job because I don't have any experience and everyone else has PhDs and every company just wants people with PhDs and I'll never find a job. And then I get on the next phone call and the people with the PhDs say, they won't hire me, I cost too much, I'm too old, they just want young people out of college who can take a low pay. And this is just a classic case of the grass is always greener on the other side. In our head, we think everyone else is having an easy time, when the truth of the matter is everyone else is having a terrible time. Everyone's job search is rough, everyone's job search is anxious, everyone's job search is just a bunch of applications with dead silence and rejections and waking up in the morning not knowing what to do and then going and mowing the lawn or watching TV and Netflix and chill and distracting yourself and then getting angry with yourself for distracting yourself and then getting back into the job search and then going manic into sending off applications and then getting burnt out. This is the job search. And this is why it's such an interesting thing to sort of study and help people out with. And I've gone through all of these things myself. But you have to realize that the grass being greener on someone else's lawn has nothing to do with the things you need to accomplish in your job search. If you're spending more time worried about the young person who just graduated college or the person with the PhD, and you haven't gone to a networking event in 3 to 4 weeks or a month or more, or you haven't set up a one-on-one coffee with anyone in your industry, then the truth of the matter is that you're not doing the activities that lead to jobs. It has nothing to do with the rest of the marketplace. So until you're doing all the job search activities that you need to be doing on a daily basis and joining calls like this, so bravo to everyone who's here, trying to get advice, trying to get motivation, like you are doing the job search right now. So this is one of those steps. So I'm doing this, I'm doing all the other things that I need to be doing. Sure, there might be some ageism. Sure, there might be there might be companies that want PhDs and there might be companies that want younger people. I'm gonna find the ones that want me. And that's gonna be your job to do the research, to reach out to people and to weed through all this stuff and delete stuff. So that also means you have to track everything you're doing to see what's working and what's not. I would say the majority of people don't track their job search. So as we're thinking through all these things, a lot of the mental barriers, we are jumping to the end barrier saying that's the thing that's stopping me, but we're forgetting that there's about 15 things, maybe even 100 things that we should have done between doing nothing and saying that it's because of this reason that are also in our way. So try and overcome the smaller barriers before worrying about that giant barrier that you really don't have control over at the end of the day. I want to check time, sorry. All right, we got about 5 minutes left. Ooh, can I read the name of the person who asked the question? I apologize. I've not been doing that. I will do that in future questions and in future Q&As. Thank you so much for calling that out. How can I be honest about not having experience with a specific competency in the job posting, yet assure that I'm willing and eager to learn? That's a really great question, and I'm going to call out your name here. Cooper. Cooper, you've asked a couple of really good questions. Thank you so much. This is one of those areas where we have to get comfortable saying, I don't know. And this is actually not just for the job search, but your overall career. And being able to, when confronted with a question, not just say the first thing that comes to your mind, but think it through and be able to say, like, I'm not sure, but here is how I find answers. So think back to any other time that you didn't know an answer to something. Maybe when you first started building your skill set, there's probably 100 things that you didn't know, right? So you bought a book, or you Googled it, or you reached out to friends, or you sat down and just brute forced your way through it, learned learned hands-on. So if you get confronted with a question, you could say, I don't have much experience with that, but I have read a little bit about it in this book, or I've encountered it in this situation. It came up in a course I took, et cetera, et cetera. And then you can say, so while I don't have, a detailed background in this topic, it is something that's on my list of things to learn. The typical way that I tend to learn is I, go take a course, go read a book, whatever the thing might be. And then you can put the question back to them. You don't have to just sit in it. You can say, in your company, how do people typically learn new skills? How do people upskill within the company? So if I were to come on and we were to change technologies, what would we do? Would there be a stipend to go take a course? Is it something I would do on my own? Do people have like collaborative sessions? Are there offsites? So you say, here's how I learn. And then you ask the question, well, how is it that people within the company learn? Oh, it seems like we're on the same page. Or, yeah, that's something that I would definitely be interested in. Do you do any initial training? I'd be on that, right away, and I'll even prep for it on my own. So you kind of just go in with the confidence that all these things can be learned. And then you back it up by saying, back when I didn't know, JavaScript, here's how I learned it. I sat down, I did X, Y, and Z. So I think it's a great question. And it's going to kind of vary depending on the person, but there are definitely ways to have it. All right, I think we're going to be on our last question here. All right, sorry, I'm just scrolling for the final question here. There's a lot of stuff that's crossed out. I'm just trying to find the ones that are open still. All right. So it seems like the biggest question as we wrap up today's session is, what do I do? That's just the biggest question. Everyone's job search, we wake up in the morning, you have a whole day ahead of you, or you're going to the job that you don't want to be going to, and you say, what do I do? I'm just stuck, right? I would say the biggest thing that's going to help you in any of your job pursuits and job search goals is to find a way to build accountability. So I'll give an example, and then I'll recommend something that you do before the end of this call. Back in the day, when I found myself going through these extreme, I applied to 100 jobs and I got an interview, yay, and then that interview said, no, we don't want you, and I just crashed and couldn't job search for 3 days, and then would come back out of that pit and try it all again and would have these extreme up and downs. The thing that helped the most was joining a professional organization that had something to do with my industry. So I joined the American Marketing Association, but you could join meetups, you could join any sort of thing. And then surrounding myself with other people who are also job seeking. Now, they can't necessarily help me find a job, but they can help me build structure around my job search. And one of the things that I actually did with a group of students years back is every morning at 7:30 or 8 a.m., we'd all get on Skype together just so that we would get out of bed. And we would hold each other accountable and make sure that everyone was at least starting the day off with a plan. And so if you can find people to help hold you accountable and to check in with maybe 2-3 times a week, make sure that you're following through on the things that you say you're going to do and following up with applications that have kind of gone cold, that's going to be one of the best things you can do for your job search. And it doesn't cost any money if you reach out to people who are in similar situations as you. And that brings us to what should you do before the end of this call? everyone here is job searching. We have lots and lots of people in this chat, 84 folks right now. Share your LinkedIn profiles with one another and try and connect outside of this call and help each other with your job search. It's going to be one of the best things that you could do in order to keep yourself on track and moving towards your goals. Maybe someone offers up a Google Hangout every Wednesday, and at whatever time every Wednesday, you all get together and check in on your goals. And we're going to do these Q&As every week, so this is another place to check in. So I think you're all doing the right things. You're moving in the right direction. You're taking action. You're not just watching Netflix. So I applaud you all for being here today. And if you have any other questions, of course, please send them our way. We're going to be creating videos every single week, and we're going to be creating these Q&A sessions to sort of open up that conversation. And I hope to bring in some technical folks as well, because a lot of the questions got a bit more technical than I am necessarily comfortable answering. So we'll be expanding all of these things, helping you out and keeping you, on a regular track as you go through your job search. So thank you all for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I wish you the best of luck in your job search. Keep in touch with us and let me know. And join us next week. The link will be in the chat, and I believe Karen's putting it in the chat. And join us next week for ongoing Q&A sessions like this. This is our first one. It was a big test, and I mean, I'm out of breath, so I think it was a success. Thank you all for being here, and bring all these questions again next week and more. Thanks so much.